Hello there, welcome back to my channel. On today's video we will compare two of the most classic black and white film, Ilford HP5 Plus and Kodak Tri-X. So come along with me and let's see what kind of results we get from each of these films. To make the comparison properly, we will use the same camera. So I have here my two Pentax MX that I like to call the twins. So they are the same SLR camera. So we will load each of the films of each of the camera. So we are using the same settings, the same lens, the same camera, and the same exposure, of course, for each of the frames, so we can properly compare between the two. So let's see what we get. I just finished taking the pictures. You have seen a couple already, but now let's go home and develop the film so I can show you what process I used. Let's go, follow me. And we're back home now. So I'm preparing everything to do the development. So to do this comparison, I will be using as developer Ilford Sol 3. So this is ideal for this experiment because this particular developer preserve the look of the film, and by that I mean that it doesn't add too much contrast or too less, so it tends to keep the look of the film. So I have prepared already here the developer, the stop bath and the fixer. For the stop bath I'm using Ilford stop, and for the fixer I'm using rapid fixer, so you know the chemistry I'm using. And the Kodak Tri-X is already inside the Patterson tank. So let's develop this one, and then the Ilford, then we scan, and then we can compare the results. We are about to start now the development, and of course we have to check the temperature because this is an important variable. So we'll make sure that it's the same for both of the film. So this is almost 19 degrees. So we'll use a time of 2 minutes and 30 seconds for this one. It's done, guys, so let's take it outside. Let's put it out. Looking good. And now we are ready to develop the roll of HP5, and same temperature as before, around 19 degrees, and we use the same developing time, 7 minutes and 30 seconds for this one. So we repeat the exact same procedure. Negative done, they are dry, so it's time for scanning. So this is my setup for scanning my negative. I use my mirrorless camera Fujifilm X-T2 with a 28mm lens and a 10mm extension tube, and I use this holder to keep the negative in place, and this small light square as my light source. So let's scan them, and then we can finally compare the results. I have my negative here on Lightroom already, and I want to show you how I convert it into a positive. So the first thing I do is to go from color to black and white. Then I use the white balance tool and I click on somewhere in the image which I know is gray. So normally that would be the road. This step is not very important in this case because this is a black and white photo, but I do it anyways. Then I crop the image just to include the part of the negative that has the photo on it, like so. Then I head into the tone curve and I will invert it completely. So the shadows to highlights and the highlights to shadows. And then finally I just adjust them for the range of the image. So I just need to move this point to this point and this one to here, and voila, there you have it. So this is the procedure I use for all of the photos that I'm showing you on this comparison. Just before we go ahead and I show you the final comparison, I just wanted to introduce myself in case that you don't know me yet. My name is Armando and I'm a street photographer based in the UK. My passion is street photography. This is what I love. It makes me feel alive every time I do it. It gives me purpose as well. And I also do it as a mindfulness practice. Every time I'm out there on the streets, I forget about my problems and I tend to be in the moment. So it's a wonderful activity to practice. So in case that you are new into this hobby and this form of art, then my mission is to help you and give you the tools, inspiration and knowledge to make the best out of the experience of practicing street photography. If you're enjoying my content, please consider subscribing. And without further ado, then let's have a look to what we got with the HP5 and the Kodak Tri-X. Let's start with this photo over here. So we have the Kodak Tri-X on the left and the Ilford HP5 Plus on the right. And one of the things I noticed comparing these two films is that when there's no high contrast on the scene, that means if we don't have extreme shadows or highlights, they tend to look quite similar. However, if we zoom in, that photo, as you can see here, the Kodak Tri-X does give a bit more of detail on the texture, so it tends to give a more sharp rendering of details of the picture, as you can see here on this comparison with the Ilford HP5. And as you can see here as well, then the Kodak Tri-X does tend to make the shadows or darker areas a bit more black, a bit more dark. Moving on this picture, again, the overall look, if you look at them quickly, is similar because we don't have strong highlights or shadows. But if we pay attention to this region, for example, on this building on the right for both pictures, even at this magnification, you can see that we do tend to get more texture once again into all of these features and crevices of these windows here from this building. And if we zoom in that area, you can see very clearly what I'm talking about. So for the Kodak Tri-X, we do get higher contrast for different kind of tones going through the shadows and the highlights, as compared to here for the Ilford HP5. We do tend to see more of a flat image, so we have just midtones here of those grays, but we do get more blacks and more whites or towards white for the Kodak Tri-X. And one of the other things to notice is the grain. You can see the Ilford it does seem to be more grainy as compared to the Kodak Tri-X, even though they are the same speed. Now for this nice view on this motorbike club in London. Again, because it was an overcast day, no strong shadows or highlights, the look is a bit similar. But then if we zoom in, we can see very clearly here the difference I was mentioning about the grain. So I cannot say that the grain for Ilford is bigger because I didn't measure the grain, of course. But from these magnifications and from this look, it does seem obvious that the Ilford does show more grain. It must be because of the morphology or the structure of those crystals of silver halide for the Ilford, but it does tend to look more grainy, as you can see here on this black section of the wall. And for that reason, I also can see that's why we can recover more detail on the textures and the surfaces out of the Kodak Tri-X film. And finally, I have this picture here with this bottle of beer. And once again, if we look at the kind of tonality or tonal range of the photos are similar, but if we look closer, once again we can see a bit more of texture being recovered from this kind of wall below the bottle. We can see more texture of the concrete there. And again, on the writing of the bottle, I can say that we do have more details as well on the label of that bottle over there. So overall, I think for these lighting conditions that we saw here, because again it was an overcast day, they tend to look very similar. I think the difference of this film stock will show more when we have these conditions. So these two pictures I took on a different day, using each of the film stock, and in my opinion, this is where the biggest difference will show between these two. When you have strong shadows and highlights together, then the Kodak Tri-X tends to make the photo more dramatic, in my opinion. The shadows are darker and the highlights are also brighter, so you get more contrast, and then in my opinion it does look better for street photography because you get more of that dramatic look. But still, if you have similar condition for HP5, you do get a good look as well, of course. And we have another example here with the sharp shadows of the subjects. And again, I like how the Kodak Tri-X renders the shadows and the highlights as compared to the more soft and flat look of the Ilford HP5. So I think the results you can get largely depend on the lighting conditions of the day. In conclusion, based on this comparison, I can say that these two film stock give very similar look if we don't have a high contrast in our scene. So if we don't have strong highlights and shadows, if we have more even lighting conditions like an overcast day or a cloudy day, then they do produce very similar results. I think the difference will show more when we have this kind of a higher difference between the tones, between shadows and highlights. So when we have golden hour and also sunrise, and whenever we have sharp shadows and highlights, then I think the film will behave in a different way. And under these conditions, I do prefer the look of the Kodak Tri-X. And then in terms of the grain, as we could see there, the Ilford HP5 seems to produce the effect of having a bigger grain, so they look more grainy. And also because of that, we could see that the Kodak Tri-X tends to render better details and also more textures, so it gives a bit more of contrast to the image as well in that sense. Well, I hope you learned something today and that you enjoy today's video, and I will see you on the next one.